life is full of moments that seem ordinary until one unexpected act changes everything. Tonight, I want to share the story of a man who lived in silence, not just because he was deaf, but because years of loneliness had taught him not to expect much from the world. He was a millionaire who dined alone every night, unnoticed, untouched, and unseen. But all of that changed the day a cleaning lady walked into the restaurant with her baby, who did something no one could have predicted. What happened next didn't just break the silence. It transformed lives. This is the story of unexpected connection, quiet kindness, and the extraordinary power hidden in the simplest moments. Unexpected connection can transform a life. It often begins in the most unremarkable moments, those quiet intersections where two paths cross without intention or preparation. In a world driven by schedules, responsibilities, and silent assumptions about others, these connections act as subtle reminders that human lives are not meant to unfold in isolation. For someone who has spent years distanced from meaningful interaction, whether by circumstance, disability, or emotional withdrawal, even a small encounter can create an impact far greater than anyone present might realize. When a person lives behind walls built from past experiences or simply from the way life has shaped their days, the possibility of being seen or understood feels distant. Yet it is precisely in these unexpected interactions that something begins to shift, like the faintest crack of light entering a darkened room. For a deaf man who has grown accustomed to solitude, his world is marked by an absence of the daily sounds others take for granted. Conversations around him turn into moving lips and vague gestures. Restaurants fill with activity that he can observe but not join, and human warmth is something he witnesses from the outside. Dining alone becomes routine, not because he prefers it, but because connection seldom arrives without effort, and effort without reciprocity becomes exhausting. Wealth might grant him comfort, but comfort does not fill the quiet of an empty table or the weight of evenings spent in silence. His life, outwardly successful, internally feels like a museum, beautiful, orderly, and untouched. That is why the arrival of the cleaning lady's baby marks a moment that disrupts his familiar pattern. Not because the baby intends anything, but because babies do what adults have forgotten how to do. They reach out without judgment, hesitation, or expectation. Their curiosity is pure, their attention unfiltered. When the baby locks eyes with the deaf millionaire, something subtle unfolds. In that small gaze, there is no pity, no confusion, no distancing. There is simply interest, as though the baby recognizes him as someone worth approaching. That simplicity alone can be transformative, because genuine, unguarded human attention is rare, especially for someone who has felt unseen for so long. The man may not hear the baby's coos or laughter, but he feels the expression on the child's face, the openness in its body language, the warmth of being noticed. Those small details become louder than sound. They cut through years of quiet evenings, offering a moment of connection that cannot be translated through wealth or status. It is an emotional resonance rather than an auditory one, and it awakens something in him he might not have realized had gone numb. Just as some emotions lie dormant until the right moment touches them, this encounter stirs a sense of belonging he hasn't felt in years. Unexpected connection also carries the power to remind a person of their own humanity. Perhaps he had convinced himself that he didn't need company, that dining alone was simply easier, or that others would not understand him. But the baby's unfiltered attention tells a different story. That connection is not earned through words or shared experiences, but simply by being present. It breaks the myth that isolation is normal or fixed. It shows that no one is beyond reach, and no one is meant to drift through life unnoticed. Even the smallest presence, especially one as innocent as a child, can bridge the widest emotional distances. Additionally, unexpected connections often reshape the way people perceive themselves. For the millionaire, the baby's interest could be a reminder that he is not defined by his deafness, nor by the silent treatment he receives from the world, nor by the loneliness that has wrapped itself around his routine. In the eyes of the baby, he is simply a person worthy of attention and engagement. That sensitivity, so natural to a child, challenges the quiet assumptions he may have lived with that he is difficult to approach, that others will always feel unsure around him, or that communication barriers are too great to overcome. The baby's instinctive connection tells him the opposite. It says, without words, that he is worthy of warmth. Such a moment also demonstrates how connection can flow in ways adults often overlook. Adults tend to measure interactions by practicality, by shared language, by social expectations. Babies do not. They operate through intuition, responding to energy, facial expressions, and emotion. Their connection is raw and honest. When the baby reaches for him or smiles at him, it is not filtered through fear or misunderstanding. It is an expression of trust. It is a gesture that includes him in the world rather than leaving him outside it. For someone who has lived so much of life watching others converse and bond while he remains on the periphery, being included without effort, without needing to explain himself, can feel like stepping back into humanity. It calls him out from behind the invisible walls he didn't realize had grown so high. It shifts the shape of his evening, turning what was once another quiet meal into a moment of emotional awakening. These unexpected bonds often ignite memories, too. Perhaps he recalls a time in his youth when he felt connected, when he wasn't defined by silence but by possibility. Perhaps he remembers family members who once showed him affection, or moments before his wealth isolated him, or days before the world grew louder while he remained quiet. The baby's presence might stir these memories, reminding him that connection is not something he has lost. It is something he can still rediscover. The human heart never stops longing for companionship, even when it pretends otherwise. Another profound element is the transformation that occurs when someone realizes that their presence holds value for another person. The millionaire has grown so used to being overlooked that he may assume no one pays attention to him. But here is a child captivated by him. The baby's reaction becomes an affirmation that he matters, that someone sees him, and that he exists as part of a shared human experience. It is difficult to overstate how deeply such recognition can affect a person who has lived in emotional quietness for so long. Moreover, unexpected connections have the power to soften the edges of grief, loneliness, or emotional numbness. When the child interacts with him, the man may feel the slow thaw of feelings he thought were gone. A smile might spread across his face, perhaps for the first time in a long while. A sense of warmth might settle in his chest, easing the coldness that solitude imposes over time. These subtle internal shifts are evidence that connection is not merely social, it is healing. It is part of what keeps a person alive on the inside. This moment also reflects how connection often comes from people who do not realize the impact they are making. The cleaning lady may be focused on her duties, unaware that her child is altering someone's life simply by being present. She may not know the lonely history of the millionaire or understand the emotional weight he carries. Yet her baby, unburdened by those details, bridges a gap that many adults would never attempt to cross. This is the beauty of unexpected connection. It does not depend on knowing someone's story. Sometimes it is the spark that begins the story. The transformation caused by that connection may extend beyond the moment itself. It might influence how he approaches people in the future. It may encourage him to open up, to seek companionship, to try again to connect with the world that once felt closed to him. It may inspire him to express gratitude, to offer kindness, or to acknowledge those around him in ways he had forgotten. Unexpected connection, once felt, often becomes a catalyst for more. Such moments also remind us that connection does not need to be grand or planned. It can be as simple as eye contact, a small gesture, or an unspoken understanding. These small interactions can break through emotional barriers more effectively than dramatic conversations or elaborate social gestures. When a baby reaches out to the millionaire, the simple action becomes an emotional invitation. It tells him he is not alone, and that connection can find him even when he is not seeking it. What truly transforms him is not the action itself, but the meaning he discovers within it. It is the realization that he is seen, acknowledged, and valued without needing to communicate through words. In the quiet space where he often feels disconnected, this moment becomes a bridge between his silent world and the living world around him. It reveals that even those who feel unreachable can be touched by the authenticity of human connection. Small actions can create powerful change. This truth often hides beneath the surface of everyday life, overshadowed by the belief that only grand gestures or monumental decisions shape the world in meaningful ways. Yet the quiet, unplanned, and seemingly insignificant moments often hold the greatest transformative potential. A single smile, a gentle touch, a brief conversation, or even an unintended gesture can set events in motion that ripple far beyond their origin. People tend to underestimate these moments because they do not appear dramatic or heroic. They happen naturally, often without thought or intention, and that simplicity makes them easy to overlook. But it is exactly this simplicity that gives them their strength, because small actions come from the most genuine parts of human nature: instinct, empathy, curiosity, and kindness. When a cleaning lady walks into a restaurant holding her baby, she does not imagine that her child's behavior will shape the life of a wealthy man dining alone. She is simply living her life, doing her job, taking care of her child, and navigating her daily challenges like so many others. She does not know that the millionaire has spent years wrapped in silence, accustomed to loneliness not merely because he cannot hear, but because the world rarely goes out of its way to include him. She cannot predict that her baby, too young to speak, too young to understand wealth or loneliness, too young to grasp the weight of silence, will be the one to reach across a gap that adults have allowed to widen over time. Yet it is this small, natural interaction, unplanned and innocent, that holds the power to gently shift the trajectory of someone else's life. The baby does not calculate or reason before acting. There is no agenda, no strategy, no expectation. Babies engage with the world purely through instinctive curiosity and openness. When the child looks toward the solitary man, smiles, or reaches out a hand, it is a small gesture by adult standards, but for the millionaire, it may feel like the first genuine connection he has experienced in a long while. What seems tiny from the outside can land deeply in the heart of someone who needs it without even realizing that need exists. This is the essence of small actions creating powerful change. They reach places that larger, more deliberate actions often miss. Adults move through the world with layers of social rules, fears, doubts, and assumptions. These layers prevent many people from taking the small steps that could brighten someone else's life: a greeting, a compliment, a moment of attention, or even a simple acknowledgement. Everyone assumes these things don't matter enough to bother with, or they fear they might be awkward, misunderstood, or insignificant. But small gestures bypass the complications of adulthood. They carry authenticity. They communicate sincerity without needing explanation. They hold emotional weight precisely because they are not forced or self-conscious. In that sense, the baby's innocent gesture becomes a powerful act not because of its size but because of its purity. For the millionaire, accustomed to being overlooked or treated with guarded sympathy due to his deafness, this small moment becomes a reminder that connection does not require perfect communication. It does not depend on words, shared experiences, or long-term relationships. Connection can come from a simple exchange of attention, and even that can breathe life into a heart that has grown too quiet. When he notices the child's interest, when he feels the warmth of being seen without pity or confusion, a shift takes place internally. It may begin as something as small as a softening of expression, a stir of emotion he hasn't felt in years, or a moment of reflection that interrupts his usual routine. But small emotional shifts often grow into larger transformations. A single spark can illuminate what has long been dim. Small actions also carry the potential to break patterns. The millionaire's life may have settled into a rhythm defined by isolation, defined by habit, defined by quiet evenings and unshared meals. He may believe this rhythm is permanent, that life simply unfolds this way now. But when the baby reaches toward him or interacts with him, that tiny disruption puts a crack in the pattern. It shows that new experiences are still possible, even when someone has stopped seeking them. It is often the smallest actions that break repeating cycles, not because they are forceful, but because they are unexpected and genuine. They slip into the routine quietly, and in that quietness they find room to influence it. What makes small actions so powerful is the way they grow. One small moment of kindness can inspire another. One recognition of humanity can encourage someone to reflect on their own life. One unplanned interaction can open a person emotionally and remind them of what they have been missing. The millionaire may leave the restaurant that night feeling subtly different, more connected, more hopeful, more aware of possibilities he once ignored. He might begin to look at people differently, recognizing that connection does not always come through perfect communication, but through shared presence. He may find himself more open to interaction, more willing to step out of his emotional isolation. And all of this may grow from a moment that lasted only seconds. Small actions often work not by changing circumstances, but by changing perception. A lonely person may still be alone after the encounter, but they no longer feel as invisible. A wealthy man may still face the challenges of deafness, but he no longer feels defined by it. A quiet life may still be quiet, but it feels less empty. The most profound changes often begin with a shift in the way someone sees themselves or the world around them. That shift rarely requires a dramatic event. It can be triggered by something as simple as being smiled at, acknowledged, or emotionally reached by someone else, even a baby. For the cleaning lady's child, the action might seem insignificant. The baby will not remember it, will not understand it, and will not know the effect it had. But this, too, highlights the power of small actions. They do not require awareness from the giver to create impact. People often believe they need to know someone's story in order to affect them, or that meaningful impact requires planning. But small actions bypass all of that. They can change someone without the giver ever realizing what they did. The millionaire, meanwhile, may reflect on the moment long after it ends. The baby's gesture might replay in his mind unexpectedly. It may remind him of human warmth he hasn't felt in years. It may stir a desire for connection he had locked away. It may encourage him to break from his solitude in small ways, reaching out to someone, starting a conversation through gesture, visiting more public spaces, or simply smiling back at others. Small actions often inspire other small actions, and the chain continues, growing larger and more meaningful over time. Even beyond the emotional transformation, small actions can carry symbolic weight. The baby's openness symbolizes what connection could be if people allowed themselves to act on instinct rather than fear. It represents the possibility of bridging gaps that seem too wide, of reaching people who seem unreachable, of touching hearts that seem closed. A simple gesture becomes a reminder that kindness is not complicated, connection is not impossible, and change does not require magnitude. Many lives have been shaped by moments just like this, moments so small they almost go unnoticed, yet strong enough to redirect a person's emotional path. Someone decides to live differently because a stranger showed them kindness. Someone regains hope because someone smiled at them. Someone feels valued because someone paid attention. This story is no different. In the calm of an ordinary evening, in the quiet corner of a restaurant, a baby reaches out to a man who needed exactly that moment, even if he did not know it. This is how small actions become powerful. They enter a person's life gently, without force, without announcement, without expectation, and change something inside them that continues to grow long after the moment has passed.